Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today as we review the MLA 8 Guidelines for Writing. We'll be reviewing general guidelines, formatting, in-text citations, and how to do a reference page. Today's presentation was developed by our writing consultant Franco Zamora through the resources provided by TAMIU's Advanced Research and Curriculum Grant. As a quick note before we begin, I want to encourage you to defer to your professor's instructions and the course syllabus if they disagree from any content shared here today. Differences between MLA 8 and MLA 7. The MLA 8th edition has been out since 2016, so this information may not be entirely new to you, but it is different from the MLA 7th edition, so I want to highlight those differences here. The new MLA 8th edition, there is no longer a requirement to include information such as the publisher location, the publication medium or media type, print, web, ebook, that sort of thing. The punctuation of reference citations is also more streamlined, utilizing only periods and commas. Rather than any parentheses marks. The source volume, issue number, and page ranges are now clearly identified with the abbreviations vol, period, no, period, and pp, period. A big change from MLA 7 to MLA 8 is the shift to viewing rules as guidelines and thus introducing more flexibility. So where does that leave us? The works cited and the in-text citations still need to be consistent with each other and expressed so that the readers will be able to find and locate each given source. MLA is very concerned with the findability of your sources, so it now uses the container system, which facilitates that. The works cited entries now end with a period, and the DOI or URL can be included when found, but they do not need the text https://. MLA 8. What is it and why use it? The MLA 8 is the most recent edition of a style and formatting guide developed by the Modern Language Association, and as I mentioned earlier, it was released back in 2016. This new version shows a shift to what is called the container system of citing reference sources. This is because the MLA developers wanted to emphasize findability of sources regardless of media type, which is super important in our increasingly digitized informational landscape. The MLA 8 is primarily used by academics in higher education from fields such as literature, cultural studies, and languages. It is one of the more commonly used citation styles among a few others. So formatting and the title page. Let's talk about some of the details of formatting. It's important to know that all papers need to be double-spaced with 1-inch margins all around. This is usually the default margin setting in most word processing applications, such as Microsoft Word and Google Docs. MLA still uses the running headers, which include the author's last name and the page number at the top right margin. However, some professors may prefer that your first page does not include a running head, so be sure to double-check with them. As for font type and size, the most common and recommended is still Times New Roman 12. All paragraphs need to be indented by 0.5 inch. Please do not attempt to embed your endnotes, but instead include your endnotes on a separate page entitled Notes, Centered, and Unformatted. So the first page formatting. The MLA 8 does not have a prescribed title page format, but your professor may request something specific, so be sure to confirm with them. In other cases, you can include the information below in the upper left-hand corner of your first page. That would be your first and last name, your instructor's name, the course name and number, and the due date in the day, month, year format. In-text citations are more about including the location of a source and are not concerned with the publication date. In the below examples, you'll see the author's name and a page number with no punctuation separating them. For multiple sources, they are punctuated by a semicolon. For example, multiple citations together would be Zamora 19, semicolon, Reyes 20. And again, that's the page number and the author's last name. Sources without a known author would have a shortened title instead. In the parentheses, you see title of the work in quotations and the page number, 22. Source from a work with multiple editions, this uses a semicolon. So here you have the author's last name, the page number, and all the different editions where you would find that same source. So multiple works with the same author, you would actually include the author's first names to differentiate between the two. So here there's F. Zamora and J. Zamora. And in works with two authors, you would list both the last names, and they would be connected by the word and as opposed to an ampersand, as we might see in an APA style. In-text citations. So here are some more examples of how your in-text citations should look and how they should be written out. If you see in yellow, indirect citations are where your source references another source, and you would say here, Freeman says, and then whatever this man is saying. And in parentheses, it would be quoted in Zamora 31, which again is the page number and the author name. For media that uses times instead of a print location, you list the hour, the minute, and the second, all punctuated by colons, as you can see listed here in the parentheses. So works with no pages but have numbered paragraphs, then you would simply list the paragraph, and that would be indicated by PARA, period. So here the example is Zamora para dot 31. So works with an organization as an author, you would list the organization name and the paragraph or page number. Works with no author but identical names, you would include in your parentheses the article, and then in addition you have brackets that clarify the source. Usually it would be a unique piece of information. For example, here it says the title of the work. In brackets, it's got web page title, and then so on. You need to include the following information: the author's last name, first name, the title of the source, the title of the container, other important contributors, the version or edition number, the publisher and publication date, and the location, such as pages, DOIs, or URLs. Below are some examples. The punctuations used are only periods and commas. Periods are used after the author's names, the title of the work, and the source before starting a new container. A note about the page range. You should omit the page numbers that they have in common, like in the example below. So here you can see the incorrect version would be 700 to 799, and the correct version is 700 to 99, with the understanding that the 7 is implied and you're not actually going back in page numbers. So the container system. You might be asking yourself, what is the container system? And that's a great question. As I already mentioned, the MLA made the switch to the container system to prioritize the findability of your sources cited in your text and documents. The MLA stresses that you, the writer, should keep in mind the needs of the audience regarding where to find your source and why you're citing it. With that in mind, the container is a larger source that contains a smaller work, such as a short story or a single essay contained within a larger book, a collection of stories and essays, or an anthology. Other examples which illustrate this are a single episode of a TV series or a podcast show, or even a single issue from a comic book series. More scholarly works, such as articles, are also contained within larger works, such as academic journals, newspapers, and magazines. The basic structure of a works cited citation entry is this: author name, title of the source, title of the container, other contributors, version, number, publisher, publication date, and location, which is again the page range, the DOI, or the URL. When a container is nested within another container, you really must consider what is important for the audience to know about the source. List only what is relevant to the audience. A blog entry may be part of a network of blogs, but does the audience need to know about each of the blogs in the network? If an essay is part of a collection of books within a series, does the audience need to know about the series? An episode of a show might be streamed only on a specific platform, such as Netflix. Does the audience need to know that platform to access the episode you're citing? When you need to cite that additional container, you may simply add it to the end of the citation entry after you finish the information for the original container. That information would be listed as follows: title of the larger container, other contributors, version, number, publisher, publication date, location, which is the pages, and the URL or DOI. So missing citation information. Because the MLA's guidelines allow for greater flexibility, you'll find it still easy to cite sources even when you have missing information. As always, consider what is most important for your reader to know to find the source. In the case of missing author names, remember that sometimes organizations, agencies, usernames, and/or website names can still be considered and listed as the source authors. Try not to cite a source as anonymous unless that's how the source was expressly signed. This formatting rules remain the same as far as italicizing and using title case as appropriate. For sources with missing titles, you can provide the reader with a description of the work, like in the example below. For sources with no date, you can give the reader the date you accessed it. So here, the missing title says that you would just include the description, which would be, a watercolor painting on a street, that sort of thing. Italics and capitalization. Let's come back to the subject of italics and title case. Only long standalone sources may be italicized, such as novels, books, anthologies, films, plays, periodicals, and databases. Titles of shorter works found within containers do not need to be italicized, but instead are marked with quotation marks. These works include articles, essays, chapter titles, songs, episodes, tweets, videos, and so on, as listed below. Here are some examples of works cited entries. A period is used after the author and the title elements of courses. Subsequent container information uses commas until a new container is used. A period is placed at the end of the container information. So for republished books, you would include author name, the title of the book italicized, the year it was published, publishers, and this final date, the most recent edition, it sounds like. For chapters in a book, you have the chapter name in quotations. The book is still italicized, and then all the same information as before with the page numbers as our location. So with works with two authors, you can see the example here, it's connected with the word and. For those who are familiar with APA style, you might notice that the MLA differs in that it asks you to spell out the word and when you have two or more authors listed together, as opposed to using an ampersand. You also have an example of how to acknowledge other contributors, such as the translator of a work in the entry for Homer's The Odyssey. And that's towards the bottom. When you see an article in a journal, there's also the author name, the journal title in quotation marks, the journal in italics, the volume, the issue number, the year, as well as the page range, and then where the bigger container would be JSTOR, and of course you got the location as the DOI right there. So let's continue. Short work from a website. You can see here that the author is actually listed as the agency, which is Purdue University. The quotations include the short work title name, and then this italics would be the web page name. And of course the location here would be this website, and then the date would use the date that you accessed this. So a podcast, we have the host names, the episode name in quotations. Welcome to Night Vale would be the actual podcast title, and that's italicized, with performance by, and those are the extra contributors. This would be the publisher, and then of course the year. So for films, you have a director listed, and here it's noted that that's the director. So as opposed to like an author, we're acknowledging the source role that he's playing. You've also got the title in italics, the company, production companies it looks like, and then the year. For YouTube videos, here it looks like there isn't really an author name, but rather there is the name of the user, it looks like. And then the title of the episode, philosophy, colon, Plato. And then YouTube is the title of the container, again in italics. The date it was published with the day, month, year, and then where to find it. So a work of art, because it's so specific, they actually do include the location because that's where you can find it in that particular museum. For social media posts, you have usernames as the author name, and this would be the title, and then Twitter is the larger container, so it's italicized, the date it was published, as well as the time, because that's how specific Twitter can get, and the location would be the website. Okay, so if you've stuck with me this far, thank you for joining me in looking at MLA 8's Guidelines for Style and Formatting of Student Papers. If you need more support, feel free to reach out by visiting the Graduate Student Academic Success Center in Pellegrino 203. As always, have a great day and happy writing.